Gloria, you don't need to come. This party is for important people. The words, sharp and sudden, froze me mid-step in my own backyard. It was Benjamin's housewarming, Benjamin, my son, celebrating in the very home I'd provided an 80% down payment for. Yet, I wasn't invited. Carrie, my daughter-in-law, had delivered the verdict straight to my face, her voice clear above the convivial murmur of her family. Up on the deck, laughter pealed and champagne glasses clinked like tiny bells, while I stood below, feeling like a housekeeper who'd wandered too far from the kitchen. The phrase, "party for important people," echoed, a dizzying spin in my head. That night, an idea began to take root, a plan no one, especially not Carrie, would ever see coming. I walked out of the yard, the small, unused bag of hostess gifts still clutched in my hand. I hadn't said a word. I just offered a slight, almost imperceptible nod to one of Carrie's laughing relatives who, drink in hand, either didn't recognize me or pretended not to. Opening my car door, I buckled up and sat for a long moment. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. It was a strange, unsettling calm. For years, I'd anticipated this exact kind of moment, not the humiliation, but the surgical clarity it brought. The drive home was silent. No radio. No music to fill the sudden, vast emptiness in my head. I craved only the steady hum of the engine, the rhythmic whisper of tires on asphalt, a tangible reminder that some small part of my world was still under my control. I'd pictured Benjamin's housewarming so many times, my early arrival, helping Carrie arrange the tables, bringing Benjamin's childhood favorite salad. In these imagined scenes, Carrie would offer a polite hug, and I'd reassure myself, at least she still remembers me. We'd take a family photo under the grand oak in the backyard, the very tree I'd planted 3 years earlier before selling my own home to fund theirs. But none of it happened. I wasn't part of the plan. I wasn't on the guest list. I wasn't in the family. Back home, I dropped my purse onto a chair and left the lights off. The house was bathed in the soft, fading orange glow of a Sunday sunset. I drifted to the armchair in the living room corner, where I usually embroidered or read the morning paper, and simply stared out the window. Not a single tear fell. I think I had cried myself dry years ago. The times Carrie complained I called too much, or Benjamin started replying with emojis instead of words, or when I'd wired money for a car repair and received only a sterile transfer successful notification in return. I'm not a woman prone to anger, nor do I hold grudges, but there's a certain wound that refuses to heal, not because of its depth, but because the one who inflicted it keeps reopening it daily with their quiet indifference. I rose and moved to the old dark brown wooden file cabinet in my study. It's where I kept everything, utility bills, letters from the 80s, receipts I habitually saved from my accounting days. My fingers found a folder, clearly labeled, Family, Benjamin, and Carrie. I'd even tabbed it with a pink sticky note. I handled it with the precision of preparing a financial report for a beloved company, turning each page. A home repair bill for $2,800. Spanish classes for my granddaughter, Olivia, $1,200. A sofa set for Benjamin's old apartment, $1,700. A co-signed bank loan for $15,000. And these were just the documented ones. The hurried transfers, the cash tucked into envelopes, the birthday gifts for Carrie so Benjamin wouldn't feel awkward. Those lived only in my memory and my slowly eroding pride. I closed the folder, a quiet click in my mind. I pulled out a blank notebook and began to write. Each expense, the date, the reason, who asked, my own quiet reaction. Every line was a pin pricking a balloon, the balloon of my illusion of being the perfect mother, the devoted grandmother, the sweet mother-in-law. I didn't know precisely what I was doing, but one truth resonated. Nothing would ever be the same again. I brewed a cup of chamomile tea and sat on the front porch. Night had fallen, and the autumn breeze was gentle, carrying yellow leaves that rode each gust, needing no permission, no invitation. I thought of Thomas, my husband. He would have been furious, but then he'd have smiled and said, "Gloria, it's time you lived for you." I sipped the tea. A faint bitterness touched my tongue, yet I felt less bitter than before. I felt clear. That night, I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't scroll Facebook, searching for photos from the housewarming. I lay awake, gazing at the ceiling, and whispered the question into the dark. If I stop paying, will I still be called Mom? I had no answer, but I knew I was about to find out. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Autumn sunlight, pale and golden, slipped through the curtains, illuminating a room so quiet I could hear the rhythmic ticking of the clock. I lay still, my body feeling as if it had weathered a storm, while my mind, paradoxically, was utterly calm. I brewed a pot of black coffee, filling the house with its scent, a phantom echo of younger mornings rushing to my accountant's desk. As an accountant, I thrived on numbers, spreadsheets, neat columns of addition and subtraction. Perhaps that's why I never broke the habit of saving every bill, every statement. Today, that mundane habit felt like an unexpected anchor. I set my hot coffee beside my laptop and opened it. The screen glowed, revealing a string of unread bank emails. Clicking Saved Accounts, I began downloading statements. The lines of data appeared, cold and exact. February last year, Benjamin, $1,200, car deposit. May, Carrie, $3,000, salon equipment. November, Olivia, $850, winter tuition. Olivia, my granddaughter, whom I'd never held because Carrie disliked the smell of old people's ointment. Each entry resurrected a memory. Benjamin's voice, tight with worry. "Mom, car's down. Need a replacement, now. Can't get to work." I darted to the bank without a second thought. The word need always moved me. Or Carrie across the cafe table, eyes glistening. "Mom, if I don't get more capital, the salon will close." I'd emptied my emergency fund, believing I was saving a family. I scrolled on. The numbers kept coming, steady and stark. I grabbed my notebook and began logging them again. This time, not for them, but for me. $2,000 this month, $500 next, another urgent $4,000. As my pen moved across the page, my hand trembled, not from age, but from a quiet, simmering anger. For years, I had unwittingly transformed myself into an ATM with a heart. I paused, took a deep breath, and then, very slowly, I totaled it all. The number hit me like a physical blow. $47,600. $47,600. That was the sum I'd poured out in 5 years, not counting cash in envelopes, unrecorded gifts, or the times I'd quietly covered their electric and water bills. $47,600. I read it again and again, as if staring at a sentence passed down from on high. I stood and paced the living room, my gaze falling on Benjamin's high school graduation photo, Thomas and I, on either side, Benjamin beaming in his blue gown. "See," Thomas had whispered then, "every hardship was worth it. If he were alive, what would he say about our son treating me like an outsider?" I returned to the table and the notebook. The numbers sat there, stark and unyielding, like a row of witnesses that couldn't be cross-examined. For the first time, I wasn't seeing them through the blurred lens of a loving mother, but through the clear, transparent, and utterly absurd perspective of an accountant. My phone buzzed, making me flinch. Carrie's name illuminated the screen. I let it ring. A text followed immediately. "Mom, just checking on your health. Call me when you're free." I laughed aloud. In all these years, Carrie had never called just to check on me. There was always a reason, a hidden need: rent, credit cards, tuition, salon equipment. Checking on your health was a flimsy curtain pulled over a bottomless hole. I didn't call back. I closed the laptop, folded the notebook, and tucked it into the drawer. But the number still echoed in my mind. $47,600. That afternoon, I walked to the local grocery store, a small basket swinging at my side. Milk, eggs, bread, some greens. The total was under $30. I paid, tucking the receipt into my wallet, and a strange humor flickered within me. I, the woman who kept a receipt for eggs, had allowed tens of thousands of dollars to vanish without so much as a proper thank you. Back home, I put away the groceries and sank into the armchair. For the first time, I felt no sorrow, only anger. Anger at my own endless lenience. Anger that motherly love had been twisted into a one-way contract. I opened my phone and scrolled through old messages. From Benjamin: Mom, we're in a bind. Can you loan me some money? From Carrie: Mom, rent is late this week. Can you help? Each one was the same: short, direct, devoid of any small talk. Reading them, I felt like a customer service representative, perpetually on call to fix their problems. That night, I opened the notebook again and wrote one last line at the very bottom: I'm not a mother anymore. I'm the family bank, and starting today, this bank is closed. As I shut the notebook, a new current moved through my chest. Lighter, but undeniably colder. I knew the next step wouldn't be easy, but I also knew I had crossed the hardest threshold, facing the truth. I turned off the living room lights and headed to my bedroom. In the dark, I heard the wind whistle past the window. I pulled the covers up, closed my eyes, and for the first time in seemingly forever, I slept like a soldier, no longer a mother waiting for a thank you text, but ready for a new fight. The next morning, I went to the bank. The room was wide and bright, sunlight pouring through enormous panes of glass onto the glossy tile floor. I'd sat here countless times before, but this time, everything was different. The heavy notebook thudded onto Reynaldo's polished mahogany desk. For 5 years, it had been a daily chronicle of what love had cost, each entry a fresh wound. No more rushing to sign transfers for Benjamin. No more scanning my balance to make it work. Today, Gloria Whitman came to end it. Reynaldo, the bank's steadfast account manager, offered a professional smile, a practiced warmth that faltered only slightly as he registered the grim set of her jaw. He knew Gloria, knew the rhythm of her visits, the anxious tilt of her head. He didn't need an appointment to guess why she was here. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitman," his baritone rumbled. "How can I help you today?" Gloria drew a deep breath, the air thick with unspoken years. "Reynaldo," she began, her voice steady, "I want to cancel all automatic transfers to Benjamin and Carrie, and I want to set up a new account, a separate one that no one knows about but me." Reynaldo's gaze sharpened, a flicker of surprise, then understanding, lighting his eyes. "Are you sure, Gloria? For 5 straight years, those transfers have been like clockwork. You've never missed one." A faint, wry smile touched Gloria's lips. "That's exactly why I'm here today." The soft glow of the monitor illuminated Reynaldo's face as his fingers flew across the keyboard. Moments later, a thick stack of papers slid across the desk. "These are the statements for the past 5 years. Do you want to look them over one last time?" Gloria opened them. The numbers stared back, cold and impersonal. Each amount she'd surrendered: a silent accusation: $200, $3,000, $850, $4,000, an endless procession of her sacrifice. Her hand traced the columns, not to reread, but to feel the weight of what she'd endured. This was the evidence. The answer to every sleepless night she'd spent questioning where she'd gone wrong. She hadn't been wrong to love, but she had been wrong to let that love become an endless financial duty. "Reynaldo," she murmured, a ghost of her former self in the word. "Do you remember when I rushed in to withdraw 5,000 for Benjamin? You asked if I was sure and I laughed, said it was for family." He nodded slowly. "I remember. I worried about you then, but you seemed determined." Gloria closed her eyes, a shadow passing over her face. "Today, I'm more determined, but this time, it's for me." Her hand was steady as she signed the cancellation form. No tremor. Ronaldo closed the file, slid it into a clear plastic folder. "All set, Mrs. Gloria. From now on, no one can touch your accounts unless you agree. I've also opened a new savings account for you. Only you know the password. I strongly recommend you don't share it with anyone, even family." A genuine smile finally bloomed. "Don't worry," she said. "I've learned a very expensive lesson." Stepping out, the midday sun struck the pavement, a clean, sharp light. A profound lightness settled over her shoulders. All these years, every bank visit had been a quiet dread, a watching of her balance drain. Today, she walked out with the indelible belief that her money truly belonged to her. That afternoon, her phone became a relentless harbinger of the past. Benjamin first, then Carrie. She let it ring, a distant, irritating chime. Then the texts began to stream. "Mom, I don't see the transfer. Did you forget?" Followed by, "Mom, we need money for the credit card bill this week. Text me back." And finally, the emotional ultimatum. "Mom, please don't do this to us. You know we rely on you." Gloria read each one, a calm resolve blooming in her chest. She didn't answer. For the first time, the phone fell silent, a stillness she hadn't realized was possible. No explanations, no excuses, no promises. That evening, she performed a quiet ritual. She retrieved the statements, each page a testament to her past. Through every item, she drew a definitive red line, whispering, "Enough, no more." It felt like unhooking chains, one by one, that had bound her for years. She remembered paying for their new air conditioner, Carrie's saccharine voice. "You're so kind. Without you, we wouldn't know what to do." Those words, once sweet nectar, now tasted like poison. She had mistaken their praise for her generosity as love, when it was merely a hook for more. By the living room window, streetlights spilled their amber glow. Gloria opened her notebook and inscribed her final entry. "The Bank of Gloria Vittman is officially closed, permanently." She closed the cover, not just for herself, but for the future. If ever she felt weak, she would open it. Let those cold numbers remind her how many years, how much money, how much trust she'd poured into a love that had always been one-sided. At precisely 10 o'clock, she extinguished every light. The house settled into quiet, but within her, there was no longer emptiness, only resolve. She didn't know how Benjamin and Carrie would react tomorrow when the money no longer flowed. But one thing was certain. She was ready for the fight. This time, she wouldn't back down. The next morning, the first sip of coffee was still warm on her tongue when the phone rang. Carrie's name illuminated the screen. Gloria stared at it, the ringing a persistent, jarring intrusion, like someone pounding on her front door. Finally, she picked up. Carrie's voice, thick with tears, filled the receiver. "Mom, the credit card got declined. The house is about to be foreclosed. We thought you forgot the transfer." Gloria took another slow sip of coffee, letting the heat bloom on the roof of her mouth. "I didn't forget, Carrie," she said, her voice a calm surprise. "I'm choosing not to send it anymore." A beat of stunned silence. Then Carrie exploded. "You can't do that. We rely on you. You know that." Gloria hung up. Her hand rested on the mug, her heartbeat strangely placid. Not 10 minutes later, Benjamin called. His voice lacked Carrie's theatricality, sharpened by a harsher, more entitled edge. Mom, what's going on? I just checked the account. No money came in. You know we have a loan payment due this week, right? Gloria closed her eyes, picturing his young face, clinging to her neck after a schoolyard spat. The memory vanished, replaced by the cold accusation in his tone. I know, she said simply, and I've decided to stop. What's wrong with you? He roared. Who's gotten in your head? Don't let people feed you weird ideas. Gloria remained silent for a long moment, then disconnected the call. The phone continued its frantic buzzing, but she let it lie, ignored. In the afternoon, she opened the windows, letting the cool, fresh air sweep through the quiet rooms. Footsteps on the porch. Carrie, her hair a mess, eyes red-rimmed. She hurried to Gloria, clutching her arm with surprising force. Mom, please don't do this. If we lose the house, Olivia will have to switch schools. She's still little. She needs stability. You're her grandma. Don't you think about her? Gloria met her daughter's gaze unflinchingly. A brief, sharp pang pierced her at the mention of her granddaughter, but it was quickly overshadowed by the memory of years. Years she hadn't been allowed to hold Olivia, not once. She's sleeping, she's studying, she's worried about germs. Gloria pulled her arm free, her voice low but firm. Carrie, I've thought about Olivia more than anyone, but what you just said isn't about her. It's about the money you want me to keep paying. Carrie's face hardened, anger flashing, the tears instantly drying. She spun, striding toward her car, tossing a venomous, "You'll regret this," over her shoulder. Gloria watched the car disappear down the driveway. No shaking, just a new, unfamiliar self-possession. That night, she wrote in her notebook, "Today, for the first time in years, I wasn't bullied by tears or scolding." She closed the book, a faint smile touching her lips. The next day, Benjamin appeared. No knock. He simply stood on the walkway, blocking her path, jaw tight. Mom, we need to talk. Gloria opened the door, but didn't invite him in. She stood on the threshold, a clear line between the home she protected and the son who saw her as a walking ATM. He glared. We can't live without your support. I'm working hard. Carrie is too. You know how expensive everything is now. Gloria cut him off. You're 35, Benjamin. At your age, your father supported a whole family and bought our first house without help. You're still leaning on your elderly mother. His frown deepened, voice stiff. You make it sound like we've never cared about you. You think all we care about is money? Gloria's reply was soft, each word heavy as stone. Tell me, when was the last time you called just to ask how I'm doing? Benjamin fell silent, his lips pressed thin, eyes avoiding hers. She knew he had no answer. Finally, he left without a goodbye. Gloria closed the door. The bitterness lingered, but she didn't collapse. With every refusal, she was pulling herself inch by inch out of the chains. For the next 3 days, her phone was a constant thrum. When no one answered, the voicemails piled up. Rent, credit card debt, bank loans, the same themes, a broken record of dependency. She listened, but she didn't reply. Instead, she walked. Around the neighborhood to the bakery. The warm scent of fresh bread filled the air. The clerk greeted her with a genuine smile, asked about her favorite jam. A sudden pang. How long had it been since she had a simple conversation that wasn't about money? She brought the bread home, ate it alone at her kitchen table, savoring each bite. Maybe this is what freedom really feels like. That night, a long text from Carrie. Mom, I'm sorry if I said anything that upset you, but we're really in a tough spot. If you don't help, we'll lose everything. I know you don't want your granddaughter to suffer." Gloria read it over and over. The words were gentle, but the familiar scent of manipulation clung to them. They weren't asking out of love. They were demanding out of fear, the fear of losing their only true source of money. She set the phone down. In the past, a message like this would have sent me running to the bank. Now, I just feel relieved I've learned to stand firm. Sunday morning, she rose early for church. For years, her mind had been a tangled web of her children's financial woes. Today, she sat still, listened. The pastor spoke of forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't mean accepting abuse. Forgiveness is when you let the burden fall off your shoulders and free your soul. Tears streamed down Gloria's face, unchecked, not for Benjamin or Carrie, but for herself, for the woman who had allowed motherhood to become chains for so many years. That afternoon, Carrie called again. This time, no soft pleading. Her voice was sharp, a cutting edge. "If you don't send money, we'll have to take action. Don't blame us." I pressed end. The usual flutter in my chest was gone, replaced by a cold calm. I knew things would get far uglier now, but a strange certainty bloomed within me. I was ready. They, meaning Benjamin and his wife, Carrie, had received my ultimatum, delivered by his father's old attorney just yesterday. I'd expected them to retreat, to scheme a different angle after my subtle suggestion that their inheritance was not a blank check, but they didn't. Just 2 days later, the stark gray pickup of my son, Benjamin, sat like a stone in front of my garage, visible the moment the door lifted. Carrie stood beside it, arms crossed, her eyes glinting like steel under the harsh afternoon sun. I left the grocery bags in the car. This show wasn't starting until I was ready. "Mom, we need a serious talk," Benjamin said, stepping forward, his voice strained. I met his gaze without a word. Carrie cut in, her tone a calculated strike. "You're hurting this family if you don't keep helping. Olivia will suffer. Do you want your granddaughter growing up in hardship?" Olivia, the familiar shield honed to a fine point, aimed squarely at my conscience. I slipped my keys into my pocket. "If you truly care about Olivia," I said, my voice steady, "learn to support your own family. A grandma can't raise a child for its parents." Benjamin's face contorted, a mask shifting to something uglier. He moved closer, his voice a low, seething boil. "You're selfish. Your whole life you preach sacrifice for family, and now you're turning your back." I looked him square in the eye. "No, Benjamin. I did sacrifice for years. You simply never valued it. From now on, I won't sacrifice anymore." Carrie shot him a sharp glance. Then her voice softened into a syrupy, artificial sweetness. "Mom, maybe someone's been influencing you. Or you're confused. Think again. Maybe there's a misunderstanding. We just want you to be happy." A rough, unfamiliar laugh bubbled from my throat. "Happy? For years, you've taken every dollar, every hour of sleep, every small joy I had. If that's love, then my happiness is dirt cheap." Carrie's face drained of color, the sugar coat dissolving to reveal a raw, cold fury. "Fine," she hissed. "If this is your choice, you'll face the consequences." Benjamin tugged her toward the truck. Before he climbed in, he turned, giving me a look not of a son, but of a chilling stranger. "You'll regret this." The gray pickup roared to life, leaving a stripe of dust on the road, a physical stain on the quiet afternoon. I stood, fists clenched, the sound of the retreating engine echoing in the sudden silence. I knew those weren't just angry words. They were a declaration of war. That afternoon, my hand trembled slightly as I opened my worn leather notebook. "Today," I wrote, the pen scratching against the page, Their true faces showed. No more circling. No more masks. They've made me the enemy. Closing the book, my heart still felt heavy, but a sliver of resolve hardened within me. I had prepared myself for their anger, their blame, but the icy contempt in my own son's eyes was a chill I hadn't anticipated. The next day, the familiar scent of old wood and beeswax of St. Jude's offered a brief solace. After the service, Pastor Graham, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners, approached. "Gloria, are you all right? You look deep in thought." I hesitated, then, in truncated sentences, laid out the raw edges of my struggle. He listened, nodding slowly, a shadow of sadness in his gaze. Family, when blinded by money, can be crueler than strangers, Gloria. But don't leave yourself alone. Seek support. Seek protection. His words resonated cold and clear as I drove home. The phase of gentle veiled threats was over. Now I had to prepare for heavier blows. Later that afternoon, an unexpected envelope lay amidst the junk mail. My name, Gloria Vance, scrawled in a messy, unfamiliar hand, stood out on the front. Inside, a single printed page, an ultimatum. If you do not continue financial support, we will be forced to pursue legal measures to protect the family's interests. Below, Benjamin and Carrie's signatures, bold and unfeeling. I sat stunned, the paper trembling in my hand. Their threats had formalized, calcified into an official document. I was no longer fighting tears or accusations. I was facing a scheme. That night, sleep proved elusive. I sat in the living room, a single table lamp casting a warm circle of light. Memories unspooled like old film. Benjamin's eager face at graduation, his beaming smile next to Carrie at their wedding. The check I'd handed them for their first apartment. The sleepless nights I'd spent trying to juggle their mounting debts. It all distilled into a painful truth. To them, I wasn't a mother. I was a mobile bank. And now that the vault was closed, they treated me like a defaulting debtor. Yet, within the profound ache, a strange, liberating clarity emerged. The truth had surfaced, stark and undeniable. No more illusions, no more faint hope that my love would eventually be reciprocated. That brutal honesty, I realized, set me free. The next morning, I called Mr. Harris, my old attorney, the same man who'd handled Robert's will. Over the phone, his silence lengthened after I described the letter. "Gloria," he said, his voice grave, "this is serious. You need to gather every piece of evidence, bank statements, texts, letters. We have to prepare for the worst-case scenario." My heart pounded, but it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline. I was no longer vaguely defensive. I had officially stepped onto a battlefield. Early that evening, as I organized my papers, the doorbell rang. A glance through the peephole confirmed it. Benjamin and Carrie again. This time, I didn't open it. I stood behind the curtain, a silent observer in my own home. They knocked, called my name. Then their voices escalated, sharp and demanding. Carrie's voice rose. "Mom, if you don't come out, we'll record a video and send it to everyone to show you're abandoning your kids and grandchild." My heart ached, a deep throb, but I didn't move. After nearly 10 grueling minutes, they left, their footprints stark on my manicured lawn. I sank into a chair, covering my face. The hurt threatened to overwhelm me, yet a fierce, quiet pride bloomed in its midst. I hadn't opened the door. I hadn't caved. That night, I added another line to my notebook. When they stop hiding, I see everything clearly. Their eyes, their tone, every word is a knife. I'd rather take a real knife than live forever in fake sweetness. I closed the notebook, exhaling slowly. This was only the beginning. The next morning, pulling back the curtains, I saw Florence, my neighbor of over 10 years, meticulously watering her petunias. We'd always kept a polite distance, nodding hellos at church or the grocery store. But today, something in the way her gaze lingered on my house felt like a question, an unspoken offer. I managed a weak smile and a wave. Florence shut off her hose, crossed the street, and stopped at my picket fence. She was about my age, silver hair neatly bobbed, still spry. "Gloria," she said, her voice gentle, "I heard a commotion at your place yesterday. Is everything all right?" I froze. Sharing family business was anathema to me. But the genuine concern in her clear eyes, it disarmed me. I opened the gate, inviting her onto the porch. We sat on the old wooden bench, the morning light filtering through the maple leaves, dappling the faded cushions with gold. Slowly, hesitantly, I told her everything. The cruel exclusion from the wedding, the canceled transfers, Benjamin and Carrie's shouting match, the threatening letter. Florence listened without interruption, her head nodding empathetically with each detail. When I finished, she reached over and gripped my hand, her touch warm and steady. "Gloria, you're not alone. I've been through the very same thing. My son tried to have me declared incapacitated to take this house." My chest tightened. Someone understood. Florence recounted her own ordeal 5 years prior. Her son and daughter-in-law, relentless in their demands for money to fund a doomed restaurant, had blamed her when it failed. It escalated to lawyers and a guardianship petition. But Florence, armed with a strong attorney and the courage of her neighbors who testified on her behalf, had won. Since then, she'd learned the painful art of setting boundaries, even with her own child. Listening to her story, I felt a strange blend of horror and profound strength. "How did you get through it?" I asked, a lump in my throat. "Didn't you feel guilty?" She looked at me, her gaze unyielding. "Of course, I cried until I couldn't breathe, night after night. But I realized being a mother doesn't mean supporting your kids for life. They grow up, they start families, they have to stand on their own 2 feet. Love doesn't mean unconditional financing." Her words rang through me like a bell, cutting through years of ingrained guilt. I saw how far I'd walked down the treacherous road of sacrifice. So far, I'd lost sight of the cliff's edge. We sat in comfortable silence for a while longer. Then, Florence offered, "If you need it, I'll testify for you. I've seen Benjamin and Carrie show up and raise their voices at you many times. The neighborhood knows it too. Don't be afraid, Gloria. You have witnesses." Tears pricked my eyes as I squeezed her hand. "Florence, you're my lifesaver. I never imagined I'd find an ally right across the street." She smiled kindly. "We're mothers, and sometimes mothers have to remind each other that we deserve protection too." That evening, I returned to my dining table, pulling out the bank files again. This time, those cold numbers weren't just evidence of my past foolishness. I saw them as bullets, and Florence had just placed a shield in my hands. I began sorting everything meticulously, dating, clipping in the texts, printing emails. As my hands moved faster, a certainty solidified within me. I'm not alone anymore. 2 days later, the gray pickup materialized outside my window again. Benjamin and Carrie grim-faced beside it, and this time, a man I didn't recognize. I didn't open the door. Instead, I picked up the phone and called Florence. "I'll be right over," she said, her voice calm and steady. "Stay calm, Gloria." When Florence arrived, stepping purposefully across her lawn, the trio outside looked visibly thrown off balance. Benjamin, rallying, managed a strained tone. "Mom, this is our legal advisor. He just wants to talk and find a solution for everyone." I stood firm behind the locked door. From beside me, Florence's voice cut through the air, clear and strong. "I'm the neighbor. I've witnessed enough disturbances here. If you continue to harass her, I'll call the police immediately." The atmosphere shifted instantly. Carrie yanked Benjamin's arm. Let's go. Standing here is pointless. I exhaled shakily, my hands still trembling, but a quiet strength settling deep within. Florence laid a warm hand on my shoulder. See? Sometimes just one witness is enough to stop them from crossing the line. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept deeply. My dreams were a vibrant garden, filled with the soft laughter of older women. It was the image of community, of shared strength, that Florence had opened up for me. The next morning, I arrived at Florence's door with a homemade apple pie. She opened it, surprised. Gloria, you didn't have to. I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes. It's not about courtesy, Florence. The aroma of warm apple pie and brewed Darjeeling filled the kitchen, a scent of peace I hadn't realized I'd traded for anxiety. Florence sat across from me, her thoughtful gaze reflecting the soft glow of the lamp. We spoke like old friends, unearthing the good memories buried under years of financial strain. Each story I told, each laugh we shared, chipped away at the hardened shell around my heart. That night, the words flowed into my notebook. Today, I found an ally, Florence, the woman who understands a pain I thought only I carried. Maybe this journey isn't just about protecting assets. Maybe it's about learning to stand with other women, stronger, together. Florence's quiet strength had already proven itself. The day she stood up for me in front of Benjamin and Carrie, a fragile breath of relief had entered my lungs. But I knew their silence was only temporary, like the deceptive calm on a lake's surface, hiding fierce currents beneath. A few days later, a stark white envelope arrived. This time, no messy scrawl from Benjamin, but a crisp printout bearing the seal of a law firm. The words inside accused me of mental instability, claiming I needed supervised financial protection. They hinted at the legal rights of direct heirs. In cold, professional language, they were building a case to drag me to court, to strip me of control over my own life. A chill snaked through me as I finished reading, but instead of panic, a steely resolve settled in my bones. I folded the letter with a deliberate crease and placed it on the table. Harris, I need you to look at this. My voice was steady as I spoke to the attorney I'd trusted for years. An hour later, Mr. Harris, a man whose calm demeanor always put me at ease, sat in my living room, the letter spread before him, his brow furrowed. Classic playbook, Gloria. They want to paint you as a paranoid elder, incapable of managing your affairs. I've seen it countless times. We need to get ahead of it, I said, my voice barely a whisper, yet firm. What do you suggest? Harris met my eyes, a flicker of reassurance there. We'll arrange an independent assessment. Doctors, specialists I know personally. A second opinion, both to document your capacity and to shut down their tactic. When we're in court, these experts will be your wall. I exhaled, a long, slow release. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone in the dark. 2 days later, the psychologist and internist Harris had arranged met me in a bright room, bathed in natural light. Dr. Moore, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes behind round frames, led me through a series of questions. Dates, figures, feelings, problem-solving scenarios. My answers were clear, concise. When she asked for my total monthly expenses over 5 years, the figure, $47,600, instantly sprang to mind, carved into me like a mark on stone. When we finished, she smiled warmly. Mrs. Whitman, honestly, your mind is sharper than many younger people. I'll write a detailed report. No one can twist this truth. My eyes stung, not from doubt, but from the raw relief of being truly seen, finally, by someone outside the storm. As Harris and I left the clinic, he said quietly, "First counterpunch landed, but prepare yourself. Benjamin and Carrie won't stop. They'll escalate, use harder psychological tactics to make you cave. Stay firm. I nodded, my heart heavy with the truth of his words. That night, my phone became a relentless enemy, ringing, buzzing. No shouting this time, but messages dripping with staged emotion. Carrie's text read, "Mom, do you remember holding Olivia for naps? She keeps calling for Grandma. She cried when she heard you're upset with us. Please don't turn your back on the family." I bit my lip. Olivia was too young to understand any of this. It was Carrie's ploy, not my granddaughter's voice. Then a text from Benjamin. "Mom, I just drove past your house. Lights were on, but you didn't open the door. I know you saw me. I don't want us to become strangers. I regret so much." A part of me, wounded and longing, wanted to run to him, to believe. But then I remembered the cold statements, the hard gleam in his eyes when he'd said, "You'll regret this." These remorseful lines were just another tactic, a silk-gloved fist. The next day, Florence listened, her gaze unwavering as I recounted the night. She took a slow sip of tea, then a faint smile touched her lips. "Gloria, they're trying everything. Threats 1 minute, sweet talk the next. Classic psychological warfare. They want to make you waver, to doubt what's real. But remember, the truth is what you've seen with your own eyes, not what they type in a text." I nodded, feeling steadier under her calm. "Keep every text, every email, every letter," she added. "Every line will become evidence of manipulation. Don't delete anything." I followed her advice, printing every message, filing them away. Each page felt like a puzzle piece, slowly revealing the whole, ugly picture. That afternoon, sorting through the financial chaos they'd created, an unknown number flashed on my phone. A woman's voice, claiming to be a social worker, stated they'd received a report. I was showing signs of confusion and needed a safety check. A cold dread seeped into my bones. Benjamin and Carrie had contacted the authorities. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I won't answer any questions without my attorney present." The caller mumbled, surprised, then hung up. I called Harris immediately. "Good, Gloria," he mused after I explained. "You did the right thing. This is their reverse psychology, trying to spin your caution into proof of paranoia. But now we have the independent assessment and witness support. Don't be afraid." The words were a lifeline. I felt as if I'd just stepped out of a trap. That evening, the cool breeze whispered through my hair on the porch. Florence arrived with a box of warm pastries. We ate, the quiet comfort between us a balm. "Gloria," she said, her voice soft but resolute. "I used to be scared too, but I realized every time they try to manipulate me, I get more evidence against them. Let them perform. We'll record it. When we're in court, the truth will show itself." A genuine smile touched my lips, the first in months, and it wasn't shaky. I suddenly understood. I wasn't just being hunted. I was gathering evidence, becoming the witness for my own truth. Before bed, I wrote in my journal, "They think they're cornering me, but their mind games are exactly what help me see their nature more clearly. I'm not swayed anymore. I have evidence, allies, and faith." I closed the notebook, laid my head on the pillow. For the first time, sleep came easy, not because the storm had passed, but because I'd learned how to stand steady within it. Just 1 week after the social worker's call, a thick envelope arrived, stamped with the local court's seal. My stomach dropped. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a petition to verify civil competency against me. My name, Gloria Vittman, was in quotation marks on the very first line, as if I were a fictional character. The plaintiffs were identified as Benjamin Vittman and Carrie Whitman. I read it over and over, a crushing weight on my chest. The stated reasons were shamelessly absurd. Mrs. Whitman was allegedly spending irrationally on useless things, isolating herself, showing signs of depression and paranoia towards family, and finally, that she risked being exploited and manipulated by outsiders regarding her assets. A dry, humorless laugh escaped me, sounding like metal scraping metal. The very people who'd lived off me for years now dared to paint me as a victim of exploitation. The next morning, the petition lay on Mr. Harris's polished desk. He sat quietly for a moment, drumming his fingers. "Gloria, this is a serious escalation, but don't worry, I've been preparing. We'll prove this is a fraudulent filing." He opened a cabinet, revealing stacks of carefully organized documents, bank statements, receipts, the money demand texts, Dr. Moore's assessment report. Together, they looked like a fortress. Harris's gaze was sharp. "Their weakness is fabricated evidence. I'll ask the court to verify the source of everything they submit. If we expose even one false piece, the whole case collapses." I nodded, a new surge of confidence blooming. This time, I wasn't just defending, I was counterattacking. As predicted, when the court sent over their file for our review, Harris spotted something off. A medical certificate, purportedly signed by a psychiatrist named Kramer, claimed I showed signs of memory decline and required long-term monitoring. Harris checked the medical database. Dr. Kramer had retired 3 years ago. The signature was clearly a forgery. I stared, numb, at the document. They forged medical records," I breathed. "Exactly," Harris said, his voice firm. "That's our strike point. Submitting forged documents to the court is a serious offense. Once we prove it, they won't just lose. They'll face legal consequences." In the days that followed, my dining table became a battlefield. Files spread out, folders meticulously labeled, bank, texts, forged medical, neighbor statements. Florence often came over, her calming presence a comfort as she patiently read through messages, reminding me to stay centered. "Gloria, think of it like cleaning out an old attic. The more dust there is, the lighter you'll feel when it's finally swept clean." One afternoon, Harris called, his voice electric. "Gloria, I just spoke directly with Dr. Kramer. He's willing to testify in court that the signature is fake. This is pivotal. Their mask is about to fall." My heart leaped, a tide of pent-up grief finally finding its way into the light. While we waited for the hearing, Benjamin and Carrie maintained their relentless routine, swinging wildly between emotional bribery and thinly veiled threats. One day, a message promising, "If you drop this, we'll let everything go and be like before." The next, a stark warning, "If you're stubborn, don't blame us when the whole family hears about your madness." I didn't respond. Every message went into its own folder, labeled manipulation tactics. One evening, an unknown number again. A woman's voice, claiming to be a legal staffer for Benjamin and Carrie. "She wanted to come to my house," she said, "to further assess your health." I laughed, a sharp disbelieving sound that surprised even myself. "Talk to my attorney," I said, the words carving ice. "Unless I invite them, nobody steps foot in my home." I hung up, the receiver settling with a click that held no tremor. I knew. The closer we edged toward court, the bolder their moves would become. The first hearing hammered its arrival. I chose a light gray suit, my silver hair sculpted into a neat pin, a whisper of makeup. The mirror reflected an older woman, yes, but one who stood steady, unwavering, no longer trembling prey. Harris, my attorney, was a quiet pillar beside me. Florence, dear, steadfast Florence, came to bear witness. Across the aisle, Benjamin and Carrie sat with faces drawn tight. Carrie's gaze skittered away, refusing mine. Benjamin offered a quick, furtive glance before his eyes nailed themselves to his lap. The plaintiff's attorney, slick and predatory, leaned into phrases like mental instability, irregular spending, asset protection. Each word was a subtle jab. I sat perfectly still, my presence a stone against their tide of accusations. The moment they presented that supposed medical certificate, Harris was on his feet. He challenged it, demanding a comparison with Dr. Kramer's official records. And then, as if summoned by a whispered plea for justice, Dr. Kramer himself entered the courtroom. Thin, white-haired, his eyes twin points of light. He held the impugned paper aloft, his voice cutting through the hushed air. "This is not my signature. I have never met Mrs. Gloria Whitman, nor have I authored this report. I retired in 2020. Whoever used my name on this document committed forgery." The silence that followed was absolute, heavy with the weight of shattered pretense. Benjamin's face blanched to a ghostly white. Carrie bowed her head, her shoulders shaking, betraying the collapse of their carefully constructed mask. Harris pressed on. Dr. Moore's independent report, unequivocally confirming my sound mind. Bank statements laid bare, tracing the flow of money directly into Benjamin and Carrie's accounts. Threatening messages, venomous letters, each piece of evidence landed like a hammer blow, dismantling their wall of lies. I clutched my purse, tears stinging my eyes, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were a torrent of release. The truth, at last, stood fully exposed in the brutal glare of daylight. The judge, his face inscrutable, declared more time was needed for a final decision. But the exposed forgery had already tipped the scales. As I walked out, whispers snaked around me. Unbelievable! Her own son forged documents to steal her assets. I took a deep, unwavering breath, my chin held high. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I stepped into the light, unafraid. Florence's hand found mine, squeezing gently. "See, Gloria," she murmured, "masks always fall. They can stage all the scenes they want, but the truth has its own voice." That night, in the quiet sanctuary of my home, I opened my notebook. "Today," I wrote, "they revealed their greed and lies before the law. I don't need to prove my love. I only need to prove the truth." I closed the book, a profound calm settling over me. The fight wasn't over, but I knew, with an unshakable certainty, that I was on the right path. I was no longer a woman blinded by honeyed words. I am Gloria Whitman, and I had looked the truth square in the eye. The formal hearing loomed, a gloomy Monday morning. I woke before dawn, sitting at my vanity for a long time, meticulously pinning my silver hair. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, but my gaze was steady, resolute. I chose the navy blazer Robert had given me for our anniversary, paired with a simple white blouse. I was not a victim. I was a woman who had lived fully and who would keep her dignity. Florence drove me, her presence a silent strength. "Gloria," she said softly, "today you're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for countless mothers squeezed dry by their own children." I squeezed her hand back, a quiet surge of faith rising in my chest. The courtroom was packed, an unusual sight. Familiar faces from church, from the neighborhood, nodded in solidarity. Across the room, Benjamin and Carrie sat rigid. Carrie, clad in black, kept her eyes downcast. Benjamin, straight-backed, lips pressed thin, his fingers interwoven with a white-knuckled tension. The judge's entrance silenced the room. The plaintiff's attorney recited his familiar litany. Financial risk, protecting an elderly woman from her own confusion. Each word, though calmly delivered, felt like a deliberate blade aimed at my heart. Then Harris rose, his voice low, deliberate, and utterly sure. "Your Honor, Mrs. Gloria Whitman is not unstable. We have official medical reports, witnesses, and irrefutable evidence that the plaintiffs employed forged documents. He placed a thick, numbered stack of papers on the table. Dr. Moore was called. She took the stand with a firm, confident step. I personally assessed Mrs. Whitman 2 weeks ago, she stated. She is fully competent, possessing good memory and clear, logical thinking. There are no signs of mental illness or cognitive decline. A ripple went through the room. Benjamin frowned, whispering something urgent to Carrie. Before they could truly react, Harris called the key witness, Dr. Kramer. He walked in, the forged paper clutched in his hand. This is not my signature. I never wrote a report about Mrs. Whitman. Using my name this way is forgery. The courtroom erupted in a low buzz that was quickly quelled by the judge's gavel. Benjamin was ashen. Carrie trembled, her body language a testament to the truth they tried to bury. On cross-examination, Harris presented 5 years of bank statements, line by excruciating line, detailing transfers from me to them. He paused at the final tally. $4,760, not including cash withdrawals. If anyone needs protection here, he said, his voice slow and heavy. It is Mrs. Gloria, a mother systematically exploited by her own son and daughter-in-law. A low murmur spread through the room. I caught someone whisper, shameful. Those murmurs were drums beating a rhythm of agreement, and my heart pounded, not from fear, but from a burgeoning sense of vindication. When the judge asked if I wished to speak, I stood. My legs quivered slightly, but my voice was clear, ringing with a lifetime of quiet strength. Your Honor, I am Gloria Whitman. I have lived 72 years, through war, working to support my family. I never imagined I'd stand here to prove my own competence, but today I am not speaking only for myself. I am speaking for all the mothers who have been exploited and cornered by their own blood. I am not crazy. I have just been silent for too long. Compassionate eyes met mine. Harris nodded. Florence wiped a tear. I knew I had given voice to the unspoken pain of so many women of my generation. The gavel struck, a bell of release. The judge announced that based on the evidence, the court would seriously investigate the document forgery. Meanwhile, the request for guardianship was temporarily denied. It was the first stinging slap of the law against Benjamin and Carrie. They left in silence, their bravado evaporated. I watched them go, a complex swirl of heartache and relief in my chest. I never thought I'd see my own son's lies exposed in court, but I had also never felt justice so close. Outside, the autumn wind was cool, almost kind. Florence squeezed my hand. You did it, Gloria. You stood tall. Harris smiled. The fight isn't over, but today we won a crucial round. That evening, beneath the warm circle of my lamp, I wrote, Today I heard the voice of justice. It doesn't erase the loss, but it gives me faith that truth will win. And I know I will keep going, however long the road. On the day the court issued its final ruling, my heart thumped like an old drum. Across the aisle, Benjamin and Carrie sat close, their faces drawn. I saw the gray at Benjamin's temples, the hollows beneath his eyes, yet his gaze was as glacial as a winter pond. No trace of the little boy who once clutched my hand while learning to walk. The judge's steady, low voice filled the quiet. After reviewing all evidence, the court fully denies the petition for guardianship over Mrs. Gloria Whitman. Furthermore, the court orders additional investigation into the use of forged documents submitted by the plaintiffs. The gavel cracked, a sharp punctuation that split the air. I closed my eyes, exhaling a shuddering breath as months of dread finally lifted. Harris's hand landed gently on my shoulder. Congratulations, Gloria. You won. But then a sharp, choked sound from Benjamin made my chest tighten. He hung his head, then stood abruptly, walking out without a backward glance. Carrie scrambled after him, calling his name softly, but he didn't stop. I watched my son's retreating back, and my heart fractured. I knew with chilling clarity that I had just lost him, not just in court, but perhaps forever. Outside, strangers approached, shaking my hand, calling me brave. Florence embraced me tightly, and Harris offered a proud smile, stating I'd set an example for women in similar situations. I smiled back, thanked each person, but the smile felt heavy, a burden. This victory had come at the searing cost of a break with the child I loved most, a wound I knew could never truly mend. That night, my house felt unnaturally quiet. I sat in the living room, a single lamp glowing. On the table rested a framed photo. Our family at Christmas, years ago. Benjamin, his arm casually around my shoulders, his youthful face beaming. I touched the cold glass, tears slipping down my cheeks before I even realized they had come. A legal victory could not fill this desolate space within me. Memories flooded back. The day I dropped him off at college, clutching him at the dorm gates. His wedding, where I had lovingly arranged every bouquet. The birth of Olivia, when I stood outside the delivery room, hands shaking, a tiny gift for my new granddaughter. These were my pride, the reasons I had worked so hard, saved every penny. Now they felt like smoke, dissipating in the quiet. 3 days later, Carrie called. Her voice, devoid of warmth, echoed in the silent room. You won. Congratulations. But don't expect to see Benjamin again. He doesn't want to look at you anymore. I kept my voice steady even. Carrie, tell Benjamin I never stopped loving my son, but I cannot let him turn me into an endless wallet. Carrie said nothing, and then the line went dead. I sat still for a long time. The pain didn't crash over me. It seeped in, slowly, relentlessly, like rain soaking into parched earth. I knew that to Benjamin, I was no longer a mother. I was the one who had humiliated him in court. He couldn't see that his own actions had driven me to this precipice. In the days that followed, I moved slowly. Florence, understanding my quiet emptiness without many words, often stopped by with flowers from her garden or a dish she'd cooked. She would just sit with me, sipping tea, letting the silence be its own comfort. The calls from Harris were steady, soft anchors in a churning sea. He'd remind me to breathe, to rest, to let go. But how do you unspool a lifetime of fear? Then, one crisp morning, as I swept autumn leaves from the porch, Olivia appeared. She stood at the end of the walk, a tiny statue clutching a worn teddy bear, her wide, dark eyes fixed on me. Before I could even whisper her name, Carrie materialized, a whirlwind of sharp angles and tighter grip. She snatched Olivia away, not a word exchanged, just that searing pull. I watched the small, retreating figure until she vanished, a tear tracing a cold path down my cheek. In that moment, I knew I hadn't just lost Benjamin. I'd lost any hope of holding my granddaughter close. That night, the quiet of the house pressed in. I opened my weathered notebook, the page stark white under the lamplight, and wrote, I won a battle, but lost a piece of my heart. Justice offers protection, but it can't restore a mother's love once it's cracked. I snapped the book shut, a long, shuddering breath escaping me. Even in the raw ache, a flicker ignited the small, fierce flame of freedom. The invisible chains were broken. The fear that had ghosted my every step was gone. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this harsh choice had, in saving me, saved the rest of my life. The next day, the old wooden doors of St. Jude's offered a quiet sanctuary. When Pastor Michael asked what I carried to the altar, I heard my own voice, clear and unwavering. Please keep Benjamin safe, even if he no longer sees me as his mother. A lightness filled me, an unexpected release. I no longer expected him to return, but the fierce maternal need for his safety remained. Leaving the church, I looked up. The sky was still a bruised gray, but far off, a single defiant beam of sunlight pierced through. A ghost of a smile touched my lips. I still have days to live, I thought, and love to give, not to those who drain, but to those who truly need it. The legal victory had sealed a chapter, but the wound in my heart throbbed, a constant reminder that winning sometimes came with an unbearable cost. I had won, but I had also lost my son. This was the truth I had to learn to carry forward. For days after the trial, I became a recluse in my small home, the silence a balm, allowing my heart to mend. Then, Florence, dear Florence, appeared at my door, the local paper clutched in her hand. On page 3, a bold headline screamed, "Elderly Mother Wins Case Against Son and Daughter-in-Law, a wake-up call on family exploitation." I read every line, my hands trembling. The article wasn't just a recap, it was a revelation, a mirror held up to a hidden epidemic. Seniors quietly bled dry by their own children, and somehow I had become its unwilling emblem. Calls began to trickle in, then flood. Reporters, women with voices shaking with stories mirroring my own. At first, I fumbled through them, awkward and terrified. My private pain, now laid bare for the world. But one night, an older woman's fractured voice whispered how her son had coerced her into signing over her house, how she was too scared to fight. I listened, then burst into tears. I can't stay silent, I realized. Florence saw it in me too. "Gloria," she urged, "you have a strength you don't see yet. Use your story to help others. We can start a support group." It felt audacious, impossible, yet something deep inside leapt. Perhaps this was the way to transmute pain into purpose. We started small, a handful of meetings in the church's community room, the air thick with tentative hope. I told my story, then Florence shared hers. Slowly, other women began to speak. Some sobbed mid-sentence, others trembled too much for words, but their eyes, wet with tears, shone with a shared relief. We called ourselves Mothers Who Won't Be Silent. Week by week, the words spread. More women came, some frail with canes, some middle-aged, caring for aging parents while battling their own exploiting siblings. Even a few men, their pride swallowed, admitted their children had pushed them to the brink. I listened, my heart aching with their pain, yet warming with an unexpected sense of belonging. I wasn't alone. One single wound had, impossibly, knit together dozens, hundreds of hearts. After one meeting, a woman named Margaret rose. She walked directly to me, took my hand, and her eyes, brimming with gratitude, found mine. "Gloria," she whispered, "because of you, I refused to sign those transfer papers my son shoved at me. I'm not afraid of being called selfish anymore. I know I have the right to live for myself." The room erupted in applause, and I felt the lonely walls I'd built around myself crumble brick by fragile brick. We didn't just share stories. Harris, steadfast and pragmatic, offered free legal guidance. He came to meetings, explaining how to document abuse, how to protect assets, how to seek genuine help. I remembered his advice for an independent evaluation, a turning point without which I might have lost everything. Bit by bit, our group solidified into a true community. We organized fundraisers, creating a small relief fund for mothers cut off financially. We wrote letters to officials, demanding more elder abuse hotlines. And I, who once curled in fear, now stood before crowds, my voice clear and strong. "We are no longer silent victims," I declared. "We have the right to speak." Some nights after a meeting, I'd sit on my porch, the streetlights casting long, warm shadows. A strange peace settled over me. I had lost Benjamin, lost the delicate bridge to my granddaughter, but I had found a new family, one forged in truth and courage. I picked up my notebook again. I'm no longer the mother who suffers in silence, I wrote. I'm part of a community where we lift each other up. Through them, I had found my voice again. I closed the book, a soft smile touching my lips. At 72, life had opened a new chapter, not steeped in tears, but illuminated by a quiet, resilient faith. That summer, for the first time in decades, I lived to my own rhythm. No more mornings waking to a mental ledger of debts. No more phone rings that felt like whips. I woke to quiet, brewed a strong cup of coffee, and stepped onto the porch, letting the breeze tangle gracefully through my silver hair. Each day truly was mine. I used my remaining savings to transform my small house. The scuffed walls became a pale, serene blue. The garden, once neglected, bloomed with new roses and wild daisies. Under the maple, I hung a porch swing, my sanctuary for reading and listening to the bird song. It wasn't grand, but it was a world I had chosen. I began to travel, something I'd postponed for years. My first trip was a week in New Orleans, the air thick with jazz and the sweet scent of beignets. In a tiny cafe, a street musician played the saxophone, and my throat tightened with unexpected emotion. Beyond the family whirlwind, beyond the constant demands, there was this, I realized, music, the warmth of strangers' smiles. When I returned, the room that had once drowned in bills and papers became my studio. Southern landscapes, a tender portrait of Florence, even a self-portrait with a calm, knowing smile, lined the walls, tangible proof of a self rediscovered. Friends from mothers who won't be silent visited, their applause like gentle rain. One evening, I found myself at Robert's grave. I sat beside his stone, the granite cool beneath my fingers, and whispered, "Robert, I did it. I'm no longer the woman who bowed her head, terrified of losing her son. I rose, standing tall. I kept what we built, and more importantly, I kept myself." A breeze rustled through the trees, and I felt as if he were smiling. Sometimes I heard whispers about Benjamin and Carrie. They'd moved to a smaller apartment. Carrie worked full-time at a nail salon. Benjamin drifted between odd jobs. I felt no hatred, only a profound, distant sadness. I had once hoped my son would understand, but I knew now that was not my burden. I had crossed that loss, put a period at its end. One Sunday, after a particularly moving meeting, Florence turned to me, her eyes thoughtful. "Gloria," she said, "we're not just saving ourselves. We're planting seeds for the next generation. Their children will grow up in families that respect them because mothers and grandmothers found the courage to speak today." I stood there, deeply moved, never having imagined my story could ripple outward like that. Now, as I write this, I am 73. My years are fewer, but each one, each month, each day, holds a precious weight. I know how to say no. I choose joy in a morning cup of tea, a park concert, the quiet blossoming of flowers. I understand that real love is never bought. It is a gift of respect and genuine care. This lesson came with a high price, but I have no regrets. From the rubble, I rebuilt a life. And to anyone listening, anyone who feels used, dismissed, a shadow in their own family, remember, you have the right to speak. You have the right to live for yourself. It is never too late to begin again. I close my notebook, smiling at the bright, living garden beyond my window. For the first time in years, the future isn't hazy. It's clear as a summer sunrise. If you've stayed with me to the very end of this story, thank you. Thank you for hearing the voice of a woman who seemed fragile but found strength in her pain. I would love to know your thoughts. If you were in my shoes, What would you do? Please share in the comments. I believe everyone's story holds value. If this touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and come back for my next stories. Your support and presence are the greatest encouragement for me to keep writing and sharing with gratitude. And I will see you soon.